The Bible. It's a collection of ancient texts, prophecies, poetry, history, and letters. It holds stories of kings, shepherds, wars, and miracles. But for many, the Bible remains an unopened mystery. Here at The Bible Explained, we're not just reading verses, we're exploring the cultural bedrock and the dramatic narrative woven through its 66 books. Hit that subscribe button and let the journey begin.
A wild donkey of a man. Wow. His hand will be against everyone and everyone's hand against him. I mean, what a stunning, almost brutal prophecy to start with. This single description is echoed for thousands of years, and it's come to define a people and a conflict. So who is this man, and how did his story end up shaping our world? All right, let's dive right into this. We're going to unpack the incredibly complex and honestly foundational story of Hagar and Ishmael. Hagar, the Egyptian handmaiden, and her son. Their journey is just so fascinating, especially because it all starts in the shadow of another, even bigger promise.
Okay, so to kick things off, we've got a promise and a problem. This is where our story really gets going. And it's a classic dilemma, right? You've got this magnificent divine promise that runs headfirst into what looks like a total human impossibility.
Just try to put yourself in their shoes for a second. 10 years. For 10 long years, an elderly Abram and his wife Sarai, who couldn't have children, are just waiting. Waiting for the son God promised them. The son who would supposedly make Abram the father of many nations. Can you feel the weight of each one of those years passing? That promise must have started to feel more and more like a distant dream. This was a real crisis of faith. So, what did they do? Well, Sarai comes up with a solution. And back then, this wasn't some crazy, out-of-the-blue idea. In the ancient Near East, what she proposed was actually a totally accepted legal custom. If a wife was barren, she could give her handmaiden to her husband, and any child born would legally be considered hers. It was seen as a really practical way to deal with a very common and painful problem. So, with God's timing feeling way too slow for them, they turned to a human solution. You could call it a plan B, born out of just sheer desperation and impatience. And as we're about to see, this attempt to, help God out is going to ignite a whole new, really bitter conflict. So Sarai offers her Egyptian slave Hagar to Abram, and he agrees. I mean, from a purely human point of view, it makes a ton of sense. But theologically, they've just taken matters into their own hands. They've introduced human effort, what the Bible later calls the flesh, into something that was meant to be a miracle of God. And the fallout? Well, it's immediate. And things fall apart almost instantly. As soon as Hagar gets pregnant, her status in the camp completely changes, and she starts looking down on her barren mistress Sarai. So Sarai, feeling totally disrespected, complains to Abram, who pretty much just tells her, she's your problem, you deal with it. Sarai's response is so harsh that Hagar, now pregnant, does the unthinkable for a slave. She runs. She just flees into the brutal, unforgiving desert. But right there, in her most desperate moment, an angel of the Lord finds her. And in this really powerful encounter, God shows Hagar that he sees her. He hasn't forgotten her. He tells her to name her son Ishmael, which literally means God hears. What an incredible name, right? It's a permanent reminder that even when she was an outcast in the middle of nowhere, God heard her cry. Okay, let's circle back to that wild prophecy from the beginning, the wild donkey. To our modern ears, that sounds like a major insult, doesn't it? But here's the thing. In the context of the Arabian desert, the wild ass was actually seen as a noble creature. It was a symbol of an untamable love for freedom, for solitude, for fierce independence. This wasn't a prophecy of savagery. It was a prophecy of a free, nomadic people who would never be conquered, the very character of the Bedouin Arabs who would be his descendants. And this brings us to our next section, because after Hagar comes back and Ishmael is born, the story enters a whole new phase. God now has to draw a very clear, very crucial line in the sand to clarify his original plan. He has to distinguish between the son who is blessed and the son of the covenant. And think about this. 13 years. Let that sink in for a second. For 13 years, Ishmael was Abraham's one and only son. He was the heir, Abraham obviously loved him, and it's easy to see why he would have just assumed, yep, this is him, this is the promised child. But God's plan was different, and it was going to require an even bigger miracle. So when Abram is 99 years old, God shows up again and makes it absolutely crystal clear. He basically says, No, Abram. Your wife, Sarah, who's 90 years old, by the way, is going to have a son. You're going to name him Isaac, and my everlasting covenant, it's going to be with him. This was a major divine course correction.
This right here, this table, gets to the absolute heart of the story. So let's break it down because it's so important. Ishmael is born from Hagar, the slave woman, through a human plan. Isaac is born from Sarah, the free woman, through a direct, miraculous promise from God. And listen to the specific words God uses. Ishmael gets a great blessing. He'll become a great nation, father 12 princes. But Isaac gets the everlasting covenant. That single difference, blessing versus covenant, is what sets the course for the entire history of their descendants.
Well, with 2 sons, 2 mothers, and 2 very different destinies all living under one tent, you just know it was a pressure cooker. It was really only a matter of time before all that simmering tension finally boiled over into a painful, final split. So the breaking point comes at the big party they're throwing for Isaac's weaning. Sarah sees the teenage Ishmael mocking his little half-brother. And the original Hebrew word here is strong. It implies real scorn. The Apostle Paul even calls it persecution. For Sarah, this is the last straw. This is a direct threat to Isaac's future. So she makes this brutal demand. Get rid of that slave woman and her son. Now this is deeply upsetting for Abraham. I mean, Ishmael is his son too. But God tells him to listen to Sarah, confirming that this separation is necessary. So he sends them away into the desert with just a little bread and water. And just as they are on the brink of death, God intervenes again. He hears the boys cry, he provides a well of water, and he repeats the promise. Ishmael too will become a great nation.
But the story doesn't just end with this painful exile. Not at all. It moves into fulfillment, where we get to see God being faithful to 2 completely separate promises that he made to both of Abraham's sons.
And here it is. The proof is right here. God's great blessing is fulfilled. He didn't just make some vague promise. The Bible actually records the names of the 12 princes who came from Ishmael, and each one became a tribal ruler. This isn't just a boring list. It's a testament to God's incredible faithfulness, keeping a nation-building promise made to a mother and son who were once dying in the desert.
So these 12 tribes, they go on to settle across this vast area of the northern Arabian Peninsula. And just like that prophecy foretold, they lived as this fiercely independent, free-roaming, and often hostile group of tribes. They were constantly at odds with their neighbors, but they were never truly conquered. The wild donkey of a man really did become a nation of them.
But the impact of this ancient family drama, it goes way, way beyond just tribal history. This one story became a foundational narrative for 3 of the world's major religions. It's incredible.
So in Christianity, the Apostle Paul takes this story and uses it as this powerful allegory. He says Ishmael represents trying to live by human effort and the law, while Isaac represents a life based on God's grace and his promise. And then in Islam, Hagar, known as Hagar, is one of the most revered women in the faith. Her frantic search for water between 2 hills is actually a key ritual that millions of pilgrims perform every year during the Hajj in Mecca. And despite all the years of hostility and being separated, the story ends with this really touching, often overlooked moment. When Abraham dies, his 2 sons, Isaac and Ishmael, they come together. They jointly bury their father in the family tomb. It's this quiet act of reconciliation, a moment of shared grief that goes beyond their divided destinies. So, what do we take away from all this? I mean, it's a complex story. It shows us that God can be faithful to more than one promise at the same time, even when they seem to be in conflict. It shows how our human plans can lead to so much strife, while God's plans require a whole lot of faith. So, is this just a story about family division, an ancient justification for why people fight, or hidden inside all that conflict, is there maybe a blueprint for how to come back together? What can these 2 brothers, the blessed son and the covenant son, what can they teach us today?
The Bible isn't just a history book. It's a living, challenging text. As you reflect on what we covered today regarding this topic, consider how this new context changes your reading of the verses. If you appreciated this breakdown, sharing it with just one friend who struggles with understanding the Bible is the best way you can support the channel. Subscribe for more, click here for your next explanation, and never stop seeking clarity. Until next time.